She also happens to be my mentee. Mel is a writing and rhetoric major. I am, and the title of her presentation, The Memes That Make Us, Navigating a Polarized Culture with Humor, Absurdity, and Surrealism. I'll turn it over.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, it's working. Maybe. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Good. Oh my God, there's so many people here. But thank you all so much for being here. Let's get into it. So, before we talk about my research and all the crazy stuff I've been doing in the past year, I wanted to give a little prelude, and that's just, how I decided on my thesis and why I want to do the research that I'm doing. And like all research, it started with a question, and that question was, how do we exist together? So, it started in 2016, this question. Something happened in 2016, I'm sure you're all aware, and that's we elected a new president. And something else was happening kind of leading up to that I noticed on the internet, and that's that memes started popping up about the presidential election, and were being used in a way that they weren't really used before. We see memes being used in presidential campaigns, like Hillary Clinton's Pokemon Go to the polls, and then we also see memes being used by people to express specific cultural references, to express their feelings about candidates. So with the candidate comparison meme, Bernie uses Chrome, Google Chrome, and Hillary uses Bing. Tells a little bit about how people feel about candidates. Then we also see a darker side of memes, and that comes in things like Hillary Clinton's comments about Trump's followers being a basket of deplorables, and then also some tweets by the president about, or at the time the presidential candidate, Donald Trump, accusing Hillary of being corrupt, and also making references to a Jewish elite, the Star of David there, money in the background. So, so there's dismissal of the opposition, as well as all this like ad hominem kind of attacks on character, all kind of being framed with internet memes. And then also something that kind of pops up is just an overall dissatisfaction with the two-party system, and people really expressing like they don't really want to vote at all because it's like choosing between the lesser of two evils. And then we also see around 2016 and a little bit before that the rise of the alt-right movement. So I just want to say I'm going to be backtracking a little bit here. A lot of this stuff was going on before 2016, but the 2016 election kind of brought it all to the surface and made me personally go back and think about it. So the alt-right as like an ideology kind of started post-World War II. It was influenced by white supremacists and like eugenics and fascist movements in the 19th and 20th centuries, and they were really, after World War II, these were like fringe, non-government groups. We have the American Nazi Party in 1959 and the National Alliance in 1974, really not making a lot of, having a lot of influence on politics. And then in the 90s, there's the rise of the KKK and neo-Nazis, but they're still not as present as we see them today. So moving more into the 21st century, white supremacy is moving towards white nationalism. So the idea of the U.S. as a white ethno-state. And people on the alt-right start presenting themselves as more respectable and intelligent so that they're more palatable to a general audience instead of just, crazy people on the fringes of society. And they actually start off not in opposition to liberal groups, but by accusing conservative candidates of betraying white Americans. And then we go to the 2008 election. Obama's elected, And we have birther conspiracies, as well as just explicitly racist opposition to Obama as the president. As you can see here by some of these images, and white supremacists kind of become boldened, and folks that weren't necessarily identifying as white supremacists kind of start to relate more to those ideas, and just that kind of like feeling of that white America feels like they're being betrayed. And then we also have, in the 2016 election, the president refused to condemn white nationalists and is also endorsed by white nationalists. And then we see the rise of people like Steve Bannon, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Richard Spencer, all kind of leading up to this Unite the Right idea of rallies. Most notably in Charlottesville, resulting in the death of Heather Heyer. And then we also see, speaking of Richard Spencer, the rise of a group called Antifa, or anti-fascist. And just like the alt-right starts in the 20th century, around the 1920s, as a response to the rise of fascism in Europe, specifically Mussolini and Italy. And it just kind of Antifa or anti-fascist just means any group that is opposing the rise of fascism or trying to overthrow fascist governments. And Antifa today is known for counter-protesting and showing up in places where alt-right groups are rallying just to make them uncomfortable, make them feel unwelcome, and also protect potential victims. They're usually dressed in what's called black bloc, just all black. Usually the face is covered to protect their identity, but also turn them into like a homogenous unit. And then there's also use of like guerrilla warfare and citizen militia tactics. And that's seen a lot in countries that are in like turmoil, places like South America, Eastern Europe, where there's like active civil war going on. So that's the prelude. Come back to my question. How do we exist together? And I have to start off with some definitions. So, memes, what you all came here for. So the idea of a meme starts, as we know today, starts in 1976 when Richard Dawkins publishes The Selfish Gene. And Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist and describes a meme as a unit of culture, analogous to a gene, which in this case a meme would be any kind of information that is transferred through non-genetic means, but reproduces in the same way that a gene does through replication, mutation, and selective pressure. So Dawkins introduces that idea, and then later we have Susan Blackmore goes off of his research, publishes The Meme Machine, and she starts applying this idea of memetics to the origins of language, the internet, and like even things like our notion of self. She also makes an argument that memes explain altruism. So people perform like self-sacrificing behaviors because we don't exist just to pass on our genes, but also our memes. She also kind of introduces the idea of virality, which kind of goes on to, in the 21st century, the idea of like a viral meme. And then my favorite source of information for the common folk, SciShow, and this really, like, watching the videos really kind of got the ball rolling for me. They talked about internet memes, the idea of a dank meme, and how memes in the sense that like Dawkins and Blackmore were talking about were more like behaviors, ways we learn and survive, like the discovery of fire, origin of language. And memes are useful to our survival because they spread much faster than genes. However, internet memes represent more a virus than a meme. So they have a much shorter lifespan. They mutate rapidly. The only goal is to mutate and spread. And they kind of hijack our true memes, which are like greater cultural ideas, and hijack their replicating mechanism so they can spread and mutate much faster and on a much larger scale. So just in my, through my research, a meme is behaviors or ideas that are passed through non-genetic means, reproducing through replication, mutation, and selective pressure. Now on to rhetoric, the thing I've been studying for the past 4.5 years. So rhetoric starts with Aristotle, as most of us know from high school, and he's coined as the father of rhetoric. General idea is that rhetoric is the art of persuasion. But just like with our real fathers, the children of rhetoric must betray Aristotle by turning his lessons against him. And that's what I've kind of seen happening more recently with rhetoric. Aristotle also has this idea of the rhetorical triangle, ethos, pathos, logos, you know, the things you build your argument on. I think memes are in there somewhere. I'm not really sure yet. Hopefully I'll figure it out by the end of the semester. But moving into the 20th century, we have Kenneth Burke, in the definition of man, says that man is the symbol-using animal, inventor of the negative, separated from his natural condition by instruments of his own making, goaded by the spirit of hierarchy and rotten with perfection. So there's a focus on humans as separate from animals because of our use of symbols, which is mimetic behavior. And then we have Jim Porter. He's really cute, I like him. And he, probably the piece that I find most influential in my study of rhetoric is his argument as emergence, rhetoric is love. Really reframes rhetoric from an the art of persuasion to what he calls emergence. You know, just presenting ourselves to others without any goal of, you know, saying, I'm right, you're wrong. It's just, let's show ourselves and see what happens. And I think probably one of the most important quotes of his is that evidence and reason are evidence and reason only if one lives in the narrative that creates and regards them. So I obviously had to come up with my own definition for rhetoric. And to me, rhetoric is not about persuasion, but it's the means by which we answer that question, how do we exist together? And I think the answer is means. So I'm going to dive into some memes that I've been looking at over the past year. Trigger warning, just in general, definitely some sensitive content. I've been looking at memes on like the extreme ends of the spectrum. So yeah, just a fair warning. So let's get into it. All right, so meme number one, we have Indiana Jones, cultural icon, and it says, why is it that when archaeologists find human remains, they're either male or female, and none of the other 700 genders? Followed by, yes, there are 64 genders, and every time you complain, we add 5 more. I don't know why Sonic's there. He just is. It's a meme. More cowboys, more masculine figures. If you're easily offended and looking for a safe space, my page ain't it. Move along, snowflake. And then we have some really uplifting graffiti. You are not alone. And the A is the anarchy symbol, which is often used by Antifa. Another cowboy, Charlie Davis, talking about Trump. We need a president who is part warrior, part frontier sheriff, part street fighter, part bully, part diplomat, and the stubbornest SOB in town. And here we have some sports mascots. One of my favorite, this guy here, big orange monster, Gritty, the Philadelphia Flyers mascot. You may recognize him. Them. Gritty uses they, them pronouns. And it says, because love is an act of courage, not fear. Love is a commitment to others. No matter where the oppressed are found, the act of love is commitment to their cause, the cause of liberation. Now we have Chuck Norris. When Chuck Norris attends a feminist rally, he comes back with his shirt ironed and a sandwich. And we got Gritty again. This is a Game of Thrones reference, for those of you that don't know. But if you want a whore, buy one. If you want a queen, guillotine her. Here we have, this is a meme format that's commonly used from the movie Finding Neverland. Kid says, "Why are so many people getting killed by police?" And man says, "Because they're too stupid to follow simple commands." Followed by some boot leather flavored Pop-Tarts. And now we have a cop here saying, "So you hate cops? Next time, call a crackhead for help. Blue lives matter more." In reference to the Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter meme. Something's missing there, whatever. All right, moving on. Western civilization, or largely white European civilization, not sorry for being the best. And just because white people couldn't do it doesn't mean it was aliens. And now we have this pretty white, blonde-haired Aryan girl saying, 100 years ago, my people were 35% of the global population. Today, just 10% and following. So sad. And Albertans, largely white Canadians, feeling left out and ignored by the Canadian government. And Indigenous people, first time. So I noticed some themes with these memes. The left memes, there's kind of a message of like love is power, acceptance, anti-authority, highlighting institutionalized violence, a genderless future or an abundance of gender, or however you take that, Indigenous rights and class differences as the main divide over gender, sexuality, ability, and whatnot. And on the right, you kind of see power to those who take it, fears of white genocide and race mixing, strict expectations of masculinity and femininity, the idea of preserving white civilization, and respecting authority. I also noticed some similarities with those. And there's the idea of freedom from oppression, a dissatisfaction with ruling parties, and a desire for individual identity while still being recognized as part of a group. And just a little end note, why I'm doing all this, why I'm looking at all these memes and kind of torturing myself. I have to point to Natalie Wynn, known by her YouTube channel, ContraPoints. She's an ex-academic philosopher, and she really does a lot of video essays that are really nuanced analyses of both like far right and far left culture. And she really kind of highlights the idea that we can't defeat fascism if we don't understand why people turn to fascism. And something like that's been really fascinating with her videos is that she's had people email her, message her, and say like, I was on the path to becoming like a white supremacist, extremist, a nationalist, and I watched your videos and they really helped change my perspective and made me realize, what was going on, how, even though those ideas might have appealed to me on the surface, they were really wrong-headed and weren't really taking into account a lot of different factors. And a lot of these people that do turn to extremism, they're individuals who are lonely, they feel abandoned and disillusioned, and they also get this message from the left that, like, the straight white male is the big enemy, so they feel like they have nowhere to turn. So of course they turn to the far right, where they're mostly used as pawns. We have examples like the El Paso shooting, the New Zealand shooting, where people are specifically pointing to like, look, they were on these pages looking at these memes. So there's something there. These aren't just funny pictures on the internet. People are really taking these ideas and applying them in real life, but we can stop the violence before it happens, despite how terrifying and torturous it can be. It's worth it because it works. And that's it. Please clap.
If you're willing to fart before it, we have just enough time for a couple of questions.
Is it possible the development of like the internet meme which you described as more of a virus or an appropriation and bastardization of like a true cultural marker meme, is just a part of, is an adaptation to like our generation's shrinking attention span and the general shift of media from broadcasting to narrowcasting, instead of like it's a more natural adaptation in response to this?
I would say that I can't say for sure, like, as to like the cause-effect relationship, whether like memes or like internet memes are the result of like a shorter attention span and that like narrowcasting, or if they were kind of like just happening at the same time. I definitely think they contribute to each other, but I can't say for sure.
Time for one more?
I was just going to say, not just your generation's shrinking attendance span.
Christ. All right, I'm gonna do both roles now. So as Mel's mentor, I felt like part of my job for the last year has been reminding her to take a break and watch silly cat videos and remember that it's not all extremes, that we're in the middle. But the thing that inspires me about Mel's work is she's answering this question that 2,500 years of rhetoric still hasn't answered, which is how do we learn to live together? And she embraced my love for Quarter and has taken him into a place that I'm sure even he never imagined we would be in terms of memes, but she deserves another